These are the blunders from down thunder that made Australia great.
On the 25th of August, 1803, Constable Joseph Luker was asked to investigate the theft of a desk containing valuables from the house of Mary Breeze. He began his investigations after midnight, and before dawn on 26th August, his breathless body was found beside a road, shockingly mangled. He was the first policeman to die in the course of duty in the colony of New South Wales.
Welcome to this episode of Blunders Down Under, laughable lessons from the past in which we talk about dumb decisions from the past which have helped make Australia great. I'm Josh McGrath.
And I'm John Gibbs, and today we're talking about Joseph Samuel, the only one of the gang of thieves ever convicted in relation to the murder of Constable Luker.
So who was Joseph Samuel?
Joseph Samuel was convicted for robbery in 1795 and had been transported to New South Wales in 1801. In 1803, at the time of the murder, he was living in Sydney at a boarding house run by Sarah Lawrence. He was part of a gang of thieves with his fellow boarders Isaac Simmons, William Bladders, Richard Jackson and John Russell. Isaac Simmons, the leader of the gang, also happened to be a police constable.
Who was the victim, Constable Joseph Luker?
Like many other police officers in the colony of New South Wales, Joseph Luker had arrived in Sydney as a convict. He'd been convicted in England of stealing lead and transported to New South Wales in 1791. After his sentence expired in 1796, Luker joined the police force.
What crime was Constable Luker investigating at the time of his death?
Mary Breeze had visited Constable Luker and informed him that her house had been broken into and her desk containing money, gold and valuable documents had been stolen. Luker agreed to investigate once his shift began at midnight, and he said to Mary that he was fairly sure that Isaac Simmons was behind the robbery.
What happened upon discovery of Luker's body?
Luker's body was found with multiple wounds on it. One of the murder weapons was his own cutlass, the guard of which was buried in his brain, suggesting that the murderer had grabbed the sharp end of the cutlass and smashed it down on Luker's head with considerable force. Another murder weapon was the wheel of a wheelbarrow, which was found at the scene, covered in blood. The wheelbarrow was traced to Sarah Lawrence's house, where the barrow without the wheel was found.
Who were the first suspects in this murder case?
Isaac Simmons and William Bladders were arrested and charged with the murder. However, they both came up with alibis which the prosecution were unable to break. Fellow lodgers said that Bladders and Simmons were at home on the night of the murder. Bladders said that blood on his clothes was from slaughtering a pig, and Simmons said that blood on his handkerchiefs were caused by nose bleeding. Both were acquitted.
Who were the other people arrested?
Sarah Lawrence's other boarders, Joseph Samuel, Richard Jackson and John Russell, were also arrested. Russell denied any part in the robbery and said he'd been cutting wood for Sarah Lawrence at the time of the robbery. However, Samuel and Jackson both cracked under interrogation and both tried to turn state's evidence. Jackson led the magistrates to the location where the stolen desk was hidden, and Samuel took them to the places where money and other valuables had been hidden. Jackson was accepted as a witness for the prosecution, and Samuel and Russell were charged with robbery. Russell was acquitted, but Samuel was convicted of robbery, having proved all the necessary evidence against himself. Thus, no one was actually convicted of the murder of Constable Luker, and Samuel was the only one convicted in relation to the robbery.
What confession did Samuel make at the scene of the execution?
The execution was scheduled exactly 1 month after the date of the murder. Samuel, standing next to the hangman's noose, was urged by the minister to reveal any information he had about the murder. Samuel said that while they had been imprisoned, Simmons had admitted to the crime. Simmons, who was present at the execution as a witness, kept interrupting and arguing with Samuel.
Something quite extraordinary happened when time finally came for Samuel to be executed. What was that?
Well, the condemned man was placed on a cart with the noose around his neck, and the cart was driven away from under him. However, the rope snapped, and Samuel fell to the ground, shaken, choking, but still alive.
And what did they do after this failed execution attempt?
They lined the cart up again, set up another rope around Samuel's neck, and drove the cart away again. This time, the rope unravelled, and Samuel fell to the ground again.
So
the spectators were starting to get a bit agitated by now and suggested that the invisible hand of Providence was at work.
So what happened after the second failed execution?
They lined up the cart once more, set up another rope around Samuel's neck, and drove the cart away again. This time the rope broke again and Samuel fell to the ground again. This was such an unbelievable occurrence that the governor decided to issue a reprieve. When they later tested the ropes, they found that the rope should have been strong enough to hold at least 5 times Samuel's weight.
And so what's the moral of this story?
The moral of the story is that if you are charged with a crime, make a watertight agreement to get immunity before you offer evidence against your fellow gang members.